Hey everyone, my name's Kyle from depot.dev, the Senior Developer Advocate, and I'm here with Anders Chen from Wistia. Welcome.
Hey, what's up?
Anders is joining us from Wistia. Wistia is a Depot user, and Anders, before we go too deep, I want to ask you, could you share with us a little bit just about what is Wistia and why would folks use Wistia, and what is it that y'all do over there?
Yeah, so Wistia is a video marketing platform where businesses can easily share, measure the impact of the videos that they have. We've seen Wistia used as like for internal learning resources, as a sales tool, and for other things as well. People get value Wistia by simply connecting when they upload a video, they connect their account to like a marketing integration like HubSpot or Marketo, and then they're able to measure and engage leads regarding like whatever they're selling or presenting. So that's kind of Wistia in a nutshell. But
Yeah, I appreciate
we have
that.
customers that like do other things too.
Let's go into that in a second. But before we go too deep, I also want to ask, and what do you do at Wistia? I know we talked about it a minute ago, but for the folks watching.
Yeah, so I'm a lead on the SRE team here at Wistia. We run a pretty lean team. We're a team of 3 people.
So I read a little bit about on your website, but I'd love to hear it from you as well. I bet this is probably like the most common question, but why would someone use Wistia over YouTube, for instance?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. I think one is like YouTube will generally inject ads into your videos. And I think the other reason is if you use YouTube, you may get some analytics, but you may not be able to either, uh, like, I guess to back up a little bit, we allow you to collect viewer information. Like, there's this thing that we call a turnstile that, like, you're able to gate your video, and before someone watches it, they have to enter, like, say, their email, their name, and you can imagine that this is pretty useful for like sales use cases.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, not only that, you're able to also track, say, when someone uh, enters their information, you can track how far they've viewed your video, what parts of the video are more engaging, and you can get that right in your marketing integration tool. So like after you set things up, for the most part, I think for a good chunk of people, it's just one and done. Then all they have to do is, beyond embedding the video, they can just like get the whole pane view through like their HubSpot or Marketo uh, like UI, and I think it kind of makes people's job easier. At least like this is in like the sales use case in particular, and so we see a lot of customers like do that.
And you mentioned before that you have some customers who are doing some, I guess, kind of different things. I'm just curious, what kind of different things are you seeing users do with Wistia?
Yeah, so beyond like say internal video use cases or sales use cases, we've definitely also seen some customers use Wistia as a broader video platform. Uh, Wistia has an API, and you can upload your videos. You can also uh, persist the various customization options that we offer, and it makes it like by the time you embed the player, it looks as nice as you want it to, and you pretty much get like the full featured experience there. And so we do have a good chunk of customers who use us programmatically and basically power a pretty rich experience for their own customers.
Yeah, very cool. I could definitely see this being, I'm just like riffing here a little bit, but I could definitely see this being really useful for like an educational website. Like if you had a course type thing, like I could see this being extremely useful in like fine tuning your courses to make sure they're more effective going forward. That'd be the type of stuff I would love to see. But I want to go a little bit into how how your pipelines are running and where Depot comes in. And I imagine most of the people watching this are fairly familiar, but for the folks who aren't watching, here at depot.dev, we call ourselves a build accelerator. Right now we have two kind of main products: our Docker builder, our remote build kit instances, as well as what we're really going to be talking about today, which is our runners, which you can use in your GitHub Actions to replace the default GitHub hosted runners. And we say that they are roughly up to 3 times faster and not roughly, exactly half the cost. So I would love to talk a little bit about how Wistia uses Depot and maybe a little bit of the transition, because if I remember from our previous conversations, y'all were actually on Jenkins maybe not that long ago. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we were on Jenkins, I think, from the period of, I'd say, probably 2015 all the way till the tail end of 2023. And so that handled basically all of the both build and deployment jobs at Wistia for all of our applications. And so I think around, I could be wrong, but probably either 2021, we started experimenting with GitHub Actions. And so I think by the time, I think GitHub Actions at the time was also gaining a lot of momentum across the DevOps community and like people who wanted to see something better than, I guess, the other competitors in the space, if you will. And so if we fast forward a little bit to 2022, early 2023, we were in the process of moving our Rails monolithic app over, and that presented us with like a number of challenges. One most notably is that GitHub Actions itself, like while it does have a cache, if you're expecting it to be very fast, it's never going to be as fast as like, say, the NVMe disk we had on Jenkins.
Yeah, when you had all your local storage, I'm sure it was effectively instantaneous. Well, as fast as your disk is anyway.
Yeah. And so there were a number of challenges there. We also had tried to run a number of GitHub Actions workers on Kubernetes. And I think the Actions runner controller at the time was also in heavy development. Like we ran into a number of issues there. I think one of them being like inconsistent performance, especially if we've been packed like our hosts a bit too hard. And I think it's also like as a very small team, you can imagine like the amount of work that we have to manage in this space continues to grow. And so I think Depot, that's when we started using Depot, I think at first as a way to speed up our Docker builds.
Oh, really? You started with the Docker builder. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Depot's first product, effectively. And it it made our life a lot easier because I think optimizing Docker builds used to be like a one person's job every 4 to 6 weeks. And then, Wistia's engineering org has grown a lot too over the time. And so that means whatever change you made to optimize the build this time, well, we're going to hope that you pull another trick out of the hat in 4 to 6 weeks if we can, right?
So tell me, I'm curious about are you still using Jenkins at all today?
We are not.
You fully moved off.
We killed it. Like I think the summer of 2023.
Nice. So I imagine too, I'm just making a guess here, but one of the biggest limitations with Jenkins, and I'm curious, maybe you were hitting this or not. I mean, it's really nice. A lot of people miss some of the aspects of, I'm not really sure what I want to call it, but like a non-ephemeral CI environment like Jenkins, where you own your servers and everything like that. Now, of course, we know the biggest problem there is you have capacity limits, right? Is that something that you were running into at any point where you had more jobs running through than your Jenkins servers were able to handle?
Uh, we were luckily able to kind of like make it work by effectively over provisioning like
Yep, that'll do
large
it.
workers, because I think at our peak we probably had maybe three large workers with maybe, I want to say like at least 4 to 8 like job slots per worker, because
Were you
like
running this in AWS?
each machine had like at least 32 to 6, I think 32 to 64 CPU,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
no one job would ever saturate the machine itself. And I mean plus with the NVMe disk, like most jobs were quite fast. And I mean it is it like those workers don't come cheap,
No,
but I
no,
mean,
no. And you got to use them all the time. They're always sitting around, doing their thing. So luckily, you were able to. It sounds like you grew kind of like at the pace that, like I'm imagining. I don't know. But if you were still on Jenkins today, you'd probably have more than your three workers hanging around. 3, 4 years in the future, you'd probably have a lot more workflows going through the pipelines now.
yeah, I think I mean, relative to the rest of the cost of our infrastructure, those Jenkins workers were not a, not a big source of spend. But I think,
You have a lot of encoding to do, I'm sure, right?
well, I think the thing is that uh, I think people in general, I mean, Groovy is not that fun to write. I mean, I'm not saying GitHub Actions YAML is any more fun, but I think it is a step up from the madness that is Groovy. However, I mean, back then we used like the Jenkins job builder that was open sourced by OpenStack, so we were writing like some form of YAML anyway. I think back then. So I guess just going from one piece of YAML to
Yeah.
another.
And it's all
Yeah,
JavaScript under the hood anyway. Although luckily, I mean, I like JavaScript. I'm a JavaScript person, but I do like too that GitHub Actions. You could run a container as the action itself too. I don't think that's really that common for whatever reason, but a lot of actions could be running inside containers as well, which is a pretty cool thing. You could be building those on
yeah,
Depot. To Depot, we talked a little bit about using the container builder, but maybe we'll go into the runner bit.
yeah. So as far as depot runners go, I mean, I felt like that was Depot's second product.
Yeah, yeah,
We
and not even that old, really.
Yeah, uh, we ended up actually using another company for runners at first before Depot had it. On my end, it was kind of like, all right, well, not only do we have Jenkins and GitHub Actions, we have EKS, and then our own like Kubernetes uh, like deployment. Basically, we had a lot that needed to be done, and at the time, the team was just two people. Me and the other guy had to finish the job of migrating everything to EKS
Mm.
and all these other things too. And we had a working GitHub Actions runner, so like workers in Kubernetes at the time. That worked for the workflows then, because I don't think any of them were particularly CPU or like disk heavy. But everything started like changing when we started putting like CI workloads from our monolith in terms of migrating them to GitHub Actions. Like I think some examples are that we would fan out our spec tests, and I think generally they would each like sub job would take about 5 to 6 minutes to complete, but in our GitHub Action workers on Kubernetes at the time, the variance actually became quite high. I think it was
Mm.
anywhere from like 4 to 10, if not even up to 15 minutes for like a sub job to complete, and so that creates a lot of pain, especially
Do you
if
know where all
someone.
that variance came from? This is on your own hosted runners, right? In your
Yeah, that's
cluster.
correct.
Yeah.
I If I had to suspect, there was something maybe with the CPU limits or something
Uh,
that when you define the deployment in Kubernetes that like
Yeah.
we were, I think from our Datadog metrics, like the throttling was quite like the what is it? The C group throttling was like much higher than expected. But then if you're just like if you're at the point where you're just isolating one job to one worker, you really might as well just toss Kubernetes right out anyway. And there were other solutions then, but at that time, we just didn't have time, and
It's too
so
much work. It's a whole, I mean, that's another person's job. Like their entire job could
yeah,
just be managing that.
yeah. And so when we started using like a managed GitHub Action runner solution, like we at least got consistency, even if it wasn't
Hmm.
like the fastest. And I think that's fine because then engineers can at least kind of know like, all right, how long do I have to wait for these tests to finish running? And then they'll just go do something else and then check back on their PR after. Whereas when you have like such high levels of variance, you just like people just kind of like it makes that context switching a lot harder, I think, too.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen a little bit of that myself. I've actually seen, I'll cut this part out, but I've actually seen there's a surprising amount of variance on GitHub's runners.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was running some
that's
tests.
actually what led us to look into managed GitHub Action Runner services in the first place because that variance was even worse, and sometimes you just run into weird network issues
Yeah,
too.
always. Yeah, just something, all the time, something. The Ubuntu mirrors are always down for whatever reason.
Yeah, something like that. And so, I mean, our own GitHub Action workers didn't have that, but like you had the maintenance, you had stuck runners, you had bugs in the Action Runners controller that we had to deal with or write workarounds for, and you can just imagine we just didn't have time. That's
It's a headache.
to do that.
Yeah, I totally get it. When I was recently talking to OpenMeter, they said a very similar thing. It's like you can run your own runner in Kubernetes. It's designed to do that. It's just that everyone knows running Kubernetes is a huge pain, and we'd rather not do it. That's why we have managed services. So yeah, I love that. So you were like you mentioned before, you actually had moved to a managed runner service. It actually was not Depot. We'll leave their name out for a moment. What made you decide to? I'm assuming you basically had a positive experience. You said, okay, managed runners are something we're interested in, but I guess maybe at this point, maybe they weren't fast enough, maybe they were too expensive. What were you thinking at this point?
So at our other provider, the way that billing worked was exactly like GitHub's billing.
Mm,
Even if your job runs for 2 minutes and 1 second, you get billed for 3 minutes.
yeah,
So that led to a really painful optimization game around our workflows where we would either what is it called? We start combining some like
oh
do some
sure,
weird things so that like instead of like launching two maybe different sub jobs where maybe it would from that point of abstraction it makes a lot more sense from like the actual GitHub Action workflow cost. Like we would see our cost like go up by like 30% doing it that way versus just rolling it back into like a single workflow. And so there was like a bunch of things that we did to kind of like do cost optimization. And ultimately, like there ended up becoming, or there ended up being more GitHub Action Runner managed services. I think 1.5 years down the line. So we started to reevaluate like our managed actions runner service provider there, and because we were already on Depot, and this was like when Depot just had launched their GitHub Actions runner service, and we saw like, okay, the billing was just the base rates, the public rates were already just a little cheaper than what we were already paying. But I think the big one is that Depot doesn't round up. So we were able to stop, and we were able to not have to play this like weird optimization game that would just cause us a bunch of headaches and
Yeah,
stuff.
that sounds like a bunch of fun. For the folks listening at home, Depot, at the end of the month, your bill is rounded up to the nearest minute, but per like pipeline per run, each one of those is tracked per second. So like at the end of the month, if you're 30 seconds past whatever total minute, we'll round that up. But the opposite side of that is like GitHub and a lot of other providers, as you were mentioning, Andrews. And this is very silly, but if you have a job that takes 5 minutes and 1 second, that whole pipeline is 6 minutes, which really adds up. I wrote a blog post not that long ago. It's on Depot, comparing the cost between different runners and such. And one of the things that was really interesting was like Next.js was the particular project I did as an example, and I just ran it on GitHub and I ran it on Depot and did a comparison of the few. And what you can see consistently is 1 extra minute, and it's only about 5 minutes, so it's a 20% roughly addition. Every run is getting like a 20% hit because of that minute roundup. It can add up a lot if you do the math. So that would definitely be something I would recommend to folks who are like running their GitHub Actions right now. You don't think about that 1 minute rounding up a lot, but take a look at it and see what it is. And I'm sure you did, which is why you started playing a really fun game of trying to divide up your work into a way that it would land at a more preferable, like 45 seconds, 50 seconds, something closer to that 1 minute, which is pretty funny. I would prefer not to have to think about those types of things when I'm writing my pipeline. I don't want that to be one of my concerns. So that's a pretty funny benefit that comes in there.
So we recently published a blog post just around how Wistia got into the whole video marketing, video platform business, and also like all the things that were much harder to do when Wistia was just a startup back in 2006, just around like the complexities around video hosting back then. I think S3 was kind of also new-ish back then, so we luckily kind of came into the age of S3, but things like CDNs, transcoding, all of those more complex systems, I think many people built that in-house as well back in the day. And so I am plugging an article that basically retells the story around how we kind of made the journey from just a small startup of a few people in 2006 era of video hosting to where we are today.
Very cool. Very cool. I appreciate that. I'm going to give that a read myself because as you may be able to tell by my occupation, I'm a big fan of video creation. I was big on like YouTube back in the day, so I see this as kind of like an inside look at the back end of the stuff that I've been messing with forever. So I love to take a look at this. I appreciate you sharing that. Anders, thanks for talking with me today, talking about how y'all went from Jenkins, using GitHub Actions, using Depot as your build kit instance, using Depot as your runner instance. I appreciate you sharing all the cool back end information with me. I think you probably answered a lot of questions that folks out there have. Thanks again for sharing your blog post. I'm sure we'll talk again in the future. I know we had a few technical issues, so hopefully all of those get ironed out in the edit. I'm going to wrap this up. Everything that we talked about today is going to be in the description. We'll have a blog post coming. We'll have everything that Anders has shared, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for hanging out with us, folks.
Have a good one.